Fortunate today to have a really nice panel of former champions, greats from Formula 5000, a very special constructor with us to talk a little bit about 5000, what made it so special. We've got Mr. Tony Adamowicz with us here, who was the 1969 Formula 5000 champion. We've got, of course, Mr. Don Nichols, who is the founder and the owner of the Shadow Formula 1 team and Formula 5000 and Can-Am team. Of course, everybody knows three-time Formula 5000 champion, Mr. Brian Redman. Sitting next to Brian is Howden Ganley, Formula 5000 driver, Formula 1 driver, sports car driver, constructor, jack of all trades. And of course, next to him, Mr. John Morton, Trans Am champion, Formula 5000 driver, and I think personally probably the driver that has the longest professional racing career of any driver out there today. How did the Formula 5000 really gave you a springboard into Formula 1? You did well in 1970, and that gave you an opportunity to drive into Formula 1 in 71. How critical has Formula 5000 been to the whole arc of your career from that point onward?
Yeah, it was absolutely critical. I'd finally rode my way up to the top of Formula 3 with the 1000cc Formula 3. And where do you go from there without a lot of money? And I didn't have much money. And just at the end of that season, I got a call from Bruce McLaren. And he said, "Oh, you're going really well in Formula 3. Would you like to come to Goodwood for a Formula 1 test?" Wow. So, yeah, I went and did that. And I didn't know where we'd go from there. And then afterwards, Bruce said, "Right, I'm going to put you into Formula 1, but I want you to do a season in the Works Formula 5000 car for 1970 for the European Championship." And so I finished second in the championship, and that was the springboard to get BRM to give me a drive in Formula 1 the following season. So Formula 5000 was absolutely critical to my career.
First drove Formula 1 in 1968 for a team that was going downhill, Cooper Car Company. And I finished third in my second Grand Prix race at Jarama in Madrid. And in the next race at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, the suspension broke. I had an enormous accident and almost tore my arm off, my right arm. And when they got me on the operating table in the University of Liège Teaching Hospital, the surgeon was a World War II surgeon who'd been a Winston Churchill aide. So I knew he had lots of experience. And he looked down at me and he said, "Monsieur Redman, it may not be possible to save the arm." And I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Professor." He said, "Why are you smiling?" I said, "Because I'm here." So that took a bit of time recovering from, and I then went sports car racing with Porsche with the 908, 917 and 908-2. And I made a really stupid retirement to South Africa at the end of 1970. Mostly because I thought I was going to be killed. All my friends were being killed, and I'd just missed being killed. And so I retired for 4 months and came back. I didn't have a drive, but Sid Taylor, who I'd driven a Lola T74 in 1969, said, "Would I like to drive his McLaren M18 Formula 5000? So that's how that all came about. And the end of the year, the car wasn't really that great, and I got Chevron to build me a 5000 car. And I said to Derek Bennett, I said, "How much and how long?" He said, 10 weeks and whatever it costs me. And I paid him £3,000. That was about $6,000 for the car. And it broke the lap record at Alton Park the first day of testing, won the first 2 races. And Sid said, "We're going to America, $20,000 for first place at Watkins Glen." With no money, we shipped it over on an open trailer with no spares. Bought a $500 station wagon in New York, towed it up, and we were leading from Graham McRae by 45 seconds with 5 laps to go, $20,000, and the battery went dead. And then, of course, as you probably know, I joined with Jim Hall and Carl Haas, Jim Hall of Chaparral Cars, and had 4 really fantastic years. It was my best racing years were in Formula 5000 in America.
Don, let me hand over to you here for a second. 1974, you're campaigning in Formula 1, you're campaigning in Can-Am. What possessed you to want to throw Formula 5000 into the mix on top of all that?
Nothing particularly possessed me to do it. It just happened that we had a contract with a sponsor, and he thought that all of the publicity opportunities were very good for his pay line. So we obliged him by spending a lot of his money doing 5,000 cars.
And was that a period in time when it was much easier to have complementary programs between F1 and Formula 5000 because they were so similar in that time period?
I think the whole package was beneficial, yes.
But in terms of the construction and all that, was it pretty much the...
Well, it's quite similar to Formula One cars, sure. The engine and gearbox are about the only different components.
So then you didn't have to ramp up the manufacturing side of your operation too much to accommodate it?
Not really. We could still maintain our concentration on F1 and Can-Am.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So you pretty much wiped the floor up in 2.5-liter Trans Am and then stepped up into Formula 5000. Was that a pretty rough adjustment to go from the tin tops to an open-wheeled 500-600 horsepower open-wheel car?
Well, you've heard of the Peter principle, haven't you? I rose to my level of incompetence. No, it was always my goal to drive faster cars. I never really had any interest in Datsuns or sedans. I got an interest.
Sacrilege, right?
I developed an interest in them, and I still do. But Formula 5000 and Indy cars, well, Formula One actually for any kid, that's the ultimate goal, but that was out of the question. Formula 5000, Peter Brock, after the season in '72, bought a Lotus 70B and presented it to me very late in life on my 30th birthday. Not as I didn't own it, but it was my birthday present on my 30th birthday. And we ran it 3 times. The first race was at Elkhart, and it ran very poorly. The brakes didn't work right. And then Brainerd, we had engine trouble. And then in Atlanta, it ran really well. We finished 4th in the first heat and 3rd in the second heat. Unfortunately, it rained in the second heat, right at the end of before the race even ended, and they called the race because it rained, and 3 cars, ours, Horst Queck, and Lothar Mochenbacher ended up in the fence after the race was over. And that ended my Formula 5000 career for a while.
Tony, you got into the series right at the time when it was transitioning from being an amateur series to being a professional series. And how much of that transition for Formula 5000 from amateur to professional influenced your transition from being an amateur into being a professional?
Well, I don't think it affected me as far as it being a amateur to professional. We always considered it to be professional, so we approached it that way. We won the '68 Trans Am Championship under 2-liter for Porsche, and we considered that to be a professional championship. So again, moving on up, getting into the car really was a big leap for me to go from a 2-liter car with fenders on it to a 5-liter car with no fenders.
The USAC involvement, was that ultimately, you think, a good thing, or
well,
did it convolute things?
No, it was a good thing because the series, when USAC joined with SCCA to co-sanction the events in 1974, the series really took off in terms of driver quality, you know, because, boy, Mario Andretti and Alan Senior and Gordon Johncock and Johnny Rutherford and all these other guys came hurtling in, and apart from Mario, none of them actually had a lot of road racing experience, so they had their own problems as well. But it was basically a good thing. It raised the level, you know, of the whole thing. It was just a pity to, you know, in '76, after I'd run the 3rd championship, I really thought that, you know, I was 40 years old, so I thought I've probably got another 10 years in this, and I can still earn, you know, a modest living, and I'll be okay. But of course, they changed the rules. It was actually the track promoters that brought this about, because they'd had bigger crowds for Can-Am than they had for 5000. And so they all said, we've got to have Can-Am back again. So the SCCA by this time said, put bodywork on your open wheel single-seaters and we'll call it Can-Am. It was just a marketing gimmick, really.
Howden, what about you? Your most memorable drive?
Well, I think winning the Alton Park Gold Cup for 5000 and going around sharing the buggy with John Surtees, world champion. But probably the biggest one was against Peter Gethin, who was the king of Formula 5000 that time, and I beat him in one of the heats, and we set a joint lap record there, which lasted for 14 years at Castle Combe. So, yeah, that was good for me.
For you, what was your most memorable drive in the 5000?
I think it was when I ran into the wall after the race was over at Road Atlanta. It totaled.
That would be memorable, I guess.
It demolished the car, and there were only 3 of them in the world. One of them happens to be here. It knocked me out, but not for very long, and I wasn't seriously injured.
But probably the best race was 75 at Mossport, where just before the race I saw that Mario had lowered his rear wing for straight line speed up that long straight. And I said to Jim Hall, I said, look, Mario's lowered his rear wing. And he said, do you want to do the same? And I said, no, I think I'll leave it the way it is. Well, the result of that was I could not get past him. He'd pull out 10 car lengths on the straight, but by the 3rd turn I was back with him again, but I couldn't get past. And so it was really, from my driver angle, it was a great race. I could not have tried any harder. And we were going so fast that we lapped the entire field, so we gained 2.5 miles or whatever it was on the entire field. And I finished half a car's length behind, so that was probably the best one.
In the late 60s and 70s, American motor racing ruled the world. I mean, everyone wanted to come here and race, whether you're English, Australian, or wherever. Trans Am, Can-Am 5000, they were fantastic series, every single one of them. Most drivers went on to, if not Formula One, reach heights the other way. Why did all 3 series just fall over?
Maybe that the SCCA wasn't into professional racing with their full impact as much as they were club racing, and I think that had a strong bearing on it. I think if USAC or some other association had, because in Formula 5000 they had the best drivers in the world, that Jody Scheckter and all the others that I mentioned, and if they can't make that, if that can't make a go of that, they can't make a go of anything. That's my opinion.
Brian, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, racing has always been a little bit like that, hasn't it? Constant change, rule changes. In 1986, I was doing IMSA and had been since 81, really. And John Bishop, who ran IMSA, I said to him in 86, I said, John, you need to introduce some kind of handicapping system, otherwise Nissan are going to run away with this championship. And he just said the guys would never stand it. Well, look at it today. Every single championship, whatever it is completely controlled by the sanctioning body. And they make tiny, minute changes to try and have all the cars finish at the same time on the same lap and everything. And that's the way it is today. And so, there's still arguments about what's a good format. Is it the right format? BMW, who I'm with this weekend, they were complaining because they added £100 to them because they'd won a race, Well, this didn't happen in the 70s and 80s. The rules were made and they were really set for the year. So, who knows? There's always problems. Formula One today, just look at all the complication of it and all the complication of the rules. And it's just, for me, it's just not the same anymore. It's a sign of growing old, I guess.
Howden, anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, traditionally road racing, which is our area, was unrestricted. And if we look at the original Can-Am, it was a fantastic show, drew huge crowds. But, of course, balancing it out, it's not new. If you remember NASCAR with the restrictor plate rules and all that sort of thing, and they put on a great show still, so it's a 500-miler and everyone cruises around for 450 miles and then they start crashing into each other. And it's a heck of a show, really. But, road racing, unfortunately, has become too expensive and it attracts less and less crowds, and that's the problem with this place, isn't it? That people don't go and spend money to look at races anymore. There's too many other things to watch.
I want to thank them for sharing their time and their memories with us, and thank you for joining us.